the Botswana. I've been there, and it's beautiful, and the language, I can hear the language in his text. I haven't heard them on tape.
They're awful.
They're awful?
He reads them, and they're awful.
Oh, you can't understand what he says.
They're just awful. I love the books, but
Yeah.
he's the awful.
Thank you. I won't waste my time. But the books are fun. And, I read through, I think, 3 or 4 of them. You get the gist. They're mystery stories, but they're lovely, and the characters are terrific, and it's Botswana, and it's just beautiful. And rules, you get red tea anywhere now, but it was quite exotic back in the day. Then we get to Zimbabwe, and this is a very strange book, Out of the Shadows by Jason Wallace. It was this year's Whitbread Costa Award. They changed the name of the Whitbread Award in England to Costa, which is for an English-speaking novel. This is a white Zimbabwe schoolboy's reaction to independence in their formerly white-ruled country. This is on my to-read list for this summer. This book has had as much impact as The Book Thief has had on some readers. If you've read The Book Thief, which takes Marcus Zusak, takes place during the Second World War, and Death is the narrator of it. It's a children's book, but Death narrates the story. This book it says to have the same impact on readers. Out of the Shadows begins in 1983. A few years after the end of the Rhodesian Bush Wars, or the Zimbabwe War of Liberation, depending on which side you work. Robert Mugabe is now the Prime Minister, and Zimbabwe is no longer ruled by white people. Robert Jacklin is a very likable character for most of the book, and he is the narrator. He starts off as an unassuming 13-year-old and grows into a strong, decent man. He has more tough decisions to make and bad choices to live with than anyone that age should, but each shapes his life and who he becomes. His friends are a less desirable bunch, and Robert was so eager to be part of their group, things would have been vastly different if he had stayed well away. At times chilling and dark, yet strangely hopeful, Out of Shadows is one of those books that I will be reading over and over. It's hard to, I hear it's hard to get out of your head.
Did you say it's fiction? Or?
It is fiction. It's all fiction, yeah. And then the last book I'm going to talk about also takes place in Rhodesia. But it is a memoir. Don't Let's Go to the Dogs Tonight, which is, I like the title. And I think this is a great book, Alexander Fuller. It's an interesting memoir of a white Rhodesian family during the Rhodesian Civil War that we were just talking about. Again, it's a memoir. Fuller's parents leave England in the early 70s. Well, she is still a toddler, the author was a toddler. They knew well that their life as white farmers living in Zimbabwe would be anything but glamorous. Living a crude rural life, the author and her older sister contended with itchy bones and worms and bites up their arms from fleas, and losing 3 siblings. Mom and Dad were freewheeling, free drinking, and often careless. Yet they were made of tough stuff, and there is little doubt of the affection among the family members. On top of attempting to make a living, they faced natives who were trying to free themselves of British rule, and who were understandably not thrilled to see more white Bwanas settling in. Fuller portrays bigotry, her own included, segregation, and deprivation. But judging by her vivid and effortless imagery, it is clear that the rich, pungent flora and fauna of Africa has settled deeply in her bones. Snapshots scattered throughout the book enhance the feeling of intimacy and adventure. A photo of the author's first day of boarding school seems ordinary enough. She is standing in front of the family's Land Rover, smiling with her mother and sister. Then the realization strikes that the young Alexander is holding an Uzi, which he had been trained to use, and the family car has been mine-proofed. This is no ordinary childhood, and it makes a riveting story, thanks to an extraordinary telling. I loved reading this. This is amazing. That's it. Now, I'm turning it over to you. What should we be reading, and where would you like to put it on the map? I'm going to be done with the sun's coming in. I'm letting off my glasses. So who's got something good they'd like to share? Anyone have anything good later? About Laos?
It takes place in Laos.
Oh,
So let's go to Asia.
Farmer's lunch.
that's great.
Yeah, I've looked for that a long time ago.
Colin Cotterill.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Corn, what was it again? The corn?
Yeah, say that again.
Lunch.
Six.
Corners.
It's Laos and, say it again.
Corner.
The corners, like.
Corner.
Corner?
Medical exam.
Oh, coroner.
Coroner.
He's like
Corn.
70 years old and trying to retire and it's.
Lunch.
It's a series.
It's a
Yes,
series.
that was the first one, I believe,
Yeah.
and then they came out with other ones.
What's the author's name?
Colin Cotterill, Cotterr.
Okay. Well, should we go?
Australia.
Australia. Okay, what do we got in Australia besides the Jews?
A lot of different books by Peter Carey.
Okay.
Some are pretty wild.
K-A-R-Y?
C-A-R-Y.
C-A-R-Y.
But I read one of his first ones, Bliss, which is really a trip.
A trip, so are they funny?
Yeah, it's funny. It's kind of like the hippies in not, I don't know. This guy drops out.
70s, 80s,
Yeah, 60s, 70s.
60s, 70s?
It's a very surreal book, though.
So you.
But he's also written a book that is a character out of a Dickens novel that gets banished to
Oh,
Australia. I can't remember.
it isn't the
title.
one from Great Expectations.
It might be.
Okay, Magwitch? I believe this
Yeah.
guy's name Magwitch, the guy who takes care of the paper in the beginning?
No, maybe it's the second one.
No.
Anyway,
Mm.
he also has got a book about a 60s radical, the American radical that moves to Australia in the 60s. He's not a real radical, he's got all kinds of different takes on Australia.
But you got a nice image of Australia.
Yeah,
Good.
he's a great writer.
Good.
What's his last name?
C-A-R-Y, Peter Carey.
Thank you.
Well, should we go?
How about the Middle East?
Okay.
I was going to say the Middle East Dreamers of the Day. That was a community reads book for Traverse City. And it's historical fiction, has Lawrence of Arabia in it. So it's sort of I liked it, except I wanted it all to be true.
Oh,
That's not true.
so it's really.
But
Yeah.
You know which by?
Dreamers of the Day.
Oh, who's the
I don't
author?
know, I don't remember the author. I'm not gonna remember.
And what did you have?
Well, I started the one that we're gonna be doing, the lemon tree,
Yes.
is good.
Where's that?
I just got started on it.
It's
and I
the
can't-
Palestinian.
Tolman's family.
It's by Sandy Tolman.
Oh, they made a movie of that.
They did.
And Sandy
Tolman, T-O-L-E-N.
and Palestinian.
Palestinian, Israeli, it goes through the history, and it's true, it's a documentary.
Really?
But, true.
The library, Kalamazoo Public Library has the movie, which is excellent, by the way.
Oh,
Yeah,
good.
and I'm pretty sure from your description, it sounds like the same one.
It's, right now, it's on one of the, I couldn't tell you which one, it's not
Sundance.
the premium
Sundance?
station. One of the independent movie channels on cable, they're running it.
Because there's another one called The Lemon Tree that's out too.
Yeah, no, this,
But
from
the
the little
ours-
description, it looked like the
You would
same
know.
story, but I didn't.
About a woman who, somebody's gonna, some big shot,
It's gonna drop, that's
Cut
the
down
other,
the
cut
tree.
down, that's the other lemon tree.
oh, it's not the
This
same
one-
book. Oh,
This one is about an Arab family who had a home in 1948. Actually 1967, they drove them from, no, it was 48. They drove them, the Israelis, the Jewish came through with Zionism, and they, after the war, and they drove them out, drove by gunpoint the Palestinians out. And then it's the history of, there was a young girl who came in, she was from the Holocaust, her parents came over, she was a baby at the time, And then Bashir was he was 6 years old when they were driven from his home. And those two characters get together in real life. And there was a lemon tree in their courtyard, and they would come together, and the father came back and would just touch the lemon tree to remember the days when they could live there. But they lived as refugees, the Palestinians, for all those years afterwards.
There's still refugee camps.
And absolutely, it's still going on, but it's that
This
history.
is nonfiction book?
Absolutely, yeah. And it was a documentary that was done in 1998 for NPR's Fresh Air, and won umpteen awards.
I hate to recommend one that I haven't read, but somebody in my family have about India called A Fine Balance. And I can't tell you who the author is. It's been on my, it's a long one, so I have, still on my pile, but my daughters and my husband was busy and all that, so I really enjoyed that.
And I love Maisie Dobbs.
Maisie Dobbs.
A lot of people say if you like Maisie Dobbs, read Louise Penny.
Okay.
That those two are kind of alike. And of course, I love English.
I know.
I like Agatha.
Do you like her? She's a little too quickly for me.
Oh, she's so
just
funny. She reminds me of that series that was on television, the British series, Hyacinth.
Oh, Hyacinth.
Keeping up appearances.
Yes.
Bouquet,
Yeah, keeping up
not
appearances.
bucket. Bouquet. Keeping up appearances, I know. It is a funny one.
She's always swearing off men when she goes to get her.
Oh, yeah. She's a quickly one. Anyone else got some good travel tips? Yes, sir.
Back at Isabel Allende.
Yes, again.
I really like her Zorro.
I loved Zorro. But that takes place in California, so that's it. But
No, they go to Spain and then
they do go to Spain.
they end up in New Orleans area with the pirates.
That's true. They do that traveling. But yeah, I was thinking about, I loved Zorro.
Yeah.
I listened to that on tape, and it was a terrific book to have in the car.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
This Gino Diaz, the brief life of Oscar Wilde. Is there any site or anywhere to find out what these words mean? There's so much Spanish slang thrown in there, I just kept grinding.
I don't know of a site. But have you Googled them?
Just translation.
Oh, I don't want to Google every
Oh,
site, you'll be reading, then all of a sudden
Yeah.
there's all this, and it could be just slang and everything.
yeah.
I had wished he had a appendix.
Oh,
It sure gives an idea of what it must be like to have to shoot on the other foot and live in a place where you don't know.
Yeah, the idiom, we destroyed many coins with our idioms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
that sort of dovetails, I was going to ask you a question. When you mentioned in a couple of books, the stunning translation.
Oh,
Now, is that the, or who's responsible for that? The author taking it, or the translator, thinking they have what it is from Spanish or whatever, and then they turn around and put it into their stunning words to express it?
The editor would choose a translator. And then the translator would read the original and then try to, keeping the sense of the original language, put it into English or whatever the other language is. And it's easier to do in prose. In poetry, it's almost impossible to do. And yet, people do it all the time. But it's the editor's choice. And usually authors don't have much say in it.
Usually what?
Authors don't have much say.
Oh,
Once
the
they
translator, yeah.
they don't have much say. Actually, they probably could say, well, this image is totally wrong. Could we try again?
But the author may not know that if they don't know the
That's
other
true.
language.
Well, it's like, the translators, you can do it on a machine now. And you can take something and translate it into Spanish and then back into English and then back into Spanish. And if you do that a few times, it makes no sense in English when you could start out with the cat had a vowel and it would come back as something totally different.
Well, it's like the idioms and figures of speech and all of that, that would not,
Everything
those don't
changes.
translate.
No.